Professor Wei spent the time of a cigarette telling me a story with only the beginning, but no end. It was 30 years ago in 1975 when the relevant departments approved the establishment of our university. In order to build the school well, 2 top talents were transferred from other universities to serve as the president and vice president. One in charge of construction and the other in charge of academics. The current president, Zheng Wenqi, was transferred to manage construction at that time, and the academic leader was history professor Wei Wenhai. As soon as the school was planned, Zheng Wenqi and Wei Wenhai had a conflict. And the root cause was the school's site selection. According to Zheng Wenqi's idea, the school site should be selected in the suburbs. So he applied to the competent department and allocated a piece of wasteland in the suburbs. Wei Wenhai was well versed in feng shui. When he saw the site selection, he shook his head and said that this piece of wasteland was not good, and it would be dangerous to build a school. Zheng Wenqi said, "We have a clear division of labor. You are an academic, and you don't understand construction, so don't get involved." Wei Wenhai said that this wasteland was backed by slopes on 3 sides and faced water on 3 sides. And it was clearly a dead place where yin and yang were. Zheng Wenqi said, "Well, Wei Wenhai, you are going to engage in feudal superstition. Don't you see whose world this is? You are a university professor and you are doing this. I will report you and criticize you. If you can't agree on the words, it will be even harder to do things together." Zheng Wenqi didn't listen to the advice and immediately started construction on this piece of land. As a result, during the construction, a tomb of medium size was indeed found underground. Professor Wei heard that the tomb was dug out and rushed to the scene to stop the construction. Unexpectedly, he was still a step too late. After arriving at the construction site, Zheng Wenqi had already directed the workers to dig the tomb into pieces, smash the coffin, and burn the body. Professor Wei was heartbroken when he saw it. In fact, he was afraid of accidents. In theory, everything in the world has yin and yang, but there are always exceptions. This dead place where Zheng Wenqi planned to build a school is a place where yin and yang are not connected. Yin and yang are not connected, and there is neither yin nor yang. From the perspective of feng shui, there is nothing special about a place that is neither yin nor yang. The only thing to worry about is that it will be used by evil people. But Professor Wei could not say it clearly, so he scolded Zheng Wenqi, saying that this is a cultural relic after all. How can it be destroyed? It is too wasteful. Zheng Wenqi said with an atheist attitude, "Wei Wenhai, you just want to be superstitious. What value can a broken coffin from the Ming Dynasty have?" Wei Wenhai had no choice but to check the tomb pit as a historian. In addition to the burned coffin and corpse, only a peculiarly shaped stone tablet was found in the pit. This is an irregular hexagon, which is only 2 feet high when erected. But the strange thing is that the name and birth and death years of the tomb owner are not engraved on the stone tablet, but an 80-line poem. The last 4 lines of the poem are, "No thoughts, no complaints, see everyone 9 times." Remember the 18 lines of the poem, read all over the sky when alive. Professor Wei did not understand the meaning of the poem and guessed that it was a poem by an ancient poet, so he took the stele away to study. Zhang Wenshi was eager for Wei Wenhai to take this thing away. Wei Wenhai moved the stele away, and Zhang Wenshi asked people to fill the grave and continue to build the school. At the end of the year, the new school was completed. Zhang Wenshi was appointed as the principal because of his good construction, while Wei Wenhai was held accountable by his superiors for blocking the construction several times during the construction of the school, and was only appointed as a professor of the history department. 5. After that, Professor Wei continued to study this poem, but he could not get the point and gradually put it aside. That year, Professor Wei met a man named Wang Juping, who was a wanderer, but he knew some mysterious arts. After a few visits, Professor Wei and Wang Juping became friends. One day, Wang Juping visited Professor Wei's house. As soon as he entered the door, he saw the poem hanging on Professor Wei's wall. Wang Juping was stunned and asked Professor Wei why he hung the corpse sacrifice curse in the house. Professor Wei then told the origin of the stone tablet. Wang Juping cried out that it was not an ordinary tomb, but a rebirth array. The rebirth array has another name, called the Living Burial Rebirth Bureau, which is a very evil sorcery. Its predecessor is the long-standing Chinese practice of burial with the dead. A long time ago, people believed that when a person died, he would drag slaves or concubines to be buried with him and continue to serve him in the underworld. Later, the practice of straw spirits and figurines was derived. This concept of burial with the dead has been passed down to the Ming Dynasty. There was an unreliable emperor in the Ming Dynasty who loved alchemy instead of the country. One day, the emperor suddenly found his conscience and announced to the world to abolish the burial with the dead system. The whole court admired him very much. But no one knew that the emperor did not want to abolish the burial with the dead, but he invented the rebirth array. You know, no matter what form of burial with the dead, it has never solved the ultimate problem after a person dies. How can he be resurrected from the dead? This is the greatest pursuit of people living on this planet for thousands of years, let alone an emperor. However, this emperor solved the problem of rebirth in another way. That is, he invented the rebirth array based on the burial of the dead. It is an unchanging truth that people need to be reincarnated after death, but the rebirth array goes against this principle. After death, the body is buried in a dead place with neither yin nor yang, and the soul is sealed in a monument and buried with the body. This monument is a monument without yin and yang, made in imitation of the dead place. It has no yin and no yang, so it is called the Harmony Monument. In this way, the body of the deceased will not decay, the soul will not disperse, and he will not become a wronged soul or an evil ghost, but wait for the original body to be resurrected. After the emperor designed this rebirth array, he was very satisfied. After his death, he used this rebirth array to achieve rebirth. But the disadvantage of the rebirth array is that it can achieve rebirth, but he cannot choose the time of rebirth. When he is reborn, the country has changed and the dynasty has changed. As a result, this emperor has only become an ordinary citizen and ended his life. This incident was recorded in the historical materials in a dignified manner. When Emperor Qianlong was studying the complete library of the 4 branches of literature, he discovered this record. He was afraid that future generations would follow suit, so he had all the records about this formation erased. However, there were many strange people and strange arts in the folk, and it didn't take long for the formation to be cracked. The reason why Wang Jupeng knew this evil formation was because it was written in an ancient collection of evil arts, Wuduan Mishu. Professor Wei paused to tell the story here to see my reaction. My reaction was within his expectations, because this Wuduan Mishu is extremely rare in the world, but I have a copy in my hand. Back then, before my 3rd grandfather died, he passed on this book that he had been looking for half his life to me. He said that with this book, I could become a qualified yin-yang master. When I heard Professor Wei talking about this book, I said, "So you also know this book?" Professor Wei said, "Wang Jupeng once told me about it." I said, "Oh," Professor Wei said, "why? Don't you know Wang Jupeng?" I said, "I haven't heard of him." Professor Wei looked at me with a half smile, shook his head and said, "Impossible. Wait." I suddenly realized, Wang Jupeng, isn't this the name of my 3rd uncle? Because he is not my biological uncle, but my grandfather's cousin, his real name is rarely mentioned. Professor Wei nodded and said, "So he is your 3rd uncle." Back then, my 3rd uncle was trapped in a corpse debt because of a love debt. He could not break it no matter what. So he transformed himself into a yin and yang master and looked for a way to break the situation. Hearing that Professor Wei was proficient in yin and yang, he got to know Professor Wei. I never expected that my relationship with Professor Wei would start from here. 6. When Wang Jupeng learned that Professor Wei had dug out the rebirth array, he knew that something was wrong. Because the spell Remember 18 Lines of Poetry was just a cover-up. It was actually sacrificing 18 corpses. This rebirth array was set up against the will of heaven. It did not follow the normal reincarnation path, but took a different path. Once the soul starts the rebirth path, 18 living people need to be buried with it to pave the way for the reborn person in the underworld. The time to start the rebirth path is the 9th day of the 9th month, when the Harmony Monument is seen again. The symbol of the Emperor's supreme power is the phrase, "See you," every 99 times. I interrupted Professor Wei and asked, "Why are 18 people buried alive? Do they represent the 18 levels of hell?" Professor Wei said, "Maybe, but it could also be a coincidence. Just random." I said, "Random?" Such a terrifying formation just randomly took 18 lives. Professor Wei said, "People are like ants. Maybe the emperor of the Ming Dynasty invented this rebirth formation and just randomly picked 18. So 18 people needed to be buried alive. Just like... I wanted to say it was just like I drew Professor Wei in the lottery. However, I didn't say it. I just said, this is too unreasonable. After all, it's human life. 18 lives. Professor Wei looked at me and said leisurely, "Destiny. To put it nicely, it's called fate. To put it bluntly, it's just randomness. There is no should or shouldn't be. There are 49 ways of heaven, and people escape one of them. Even the emperor knows that you can't do everything to the extreme, so he sees people for a long time." Professor Wei meant that this rebirth formation can only be opened by someone unintentionally, not by anyone who wants to open it. Otherwise, the emperor would not be reborn in the next dynasty. Wouldn't it be better to be reborn directly in this dynasty and continue to be the emperor? Professor Wei and Wang Juping knew the principle of this rebirth formation, so they planned to break this evil formation.